Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this next installment of the Thread Speaker Series. My name is Sarah Heminger, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Thread. We are ecstatic to bring you this new forum for sharing inspiring ideas from exceptional leaders like Erricka, human beings who just really make the effort to make sure that equity plays out across a variety of contexts and demonstrate the power of building intentional relationships across lines of difference to create a more equitable social fabric. At Thread, we believe that relationships are at the heart of change, whether that's an individual growth or systemic shifts and everything in between. By building intentional relationships across lines of difference, we believe that we can break down the structural barriers that exist and build a society that recognizes the intrinsic value of each human being. With this speaker series, we are shining light on a diverse group of leaders who are models for how others can drive sustained change through coordinated and consistent interventions in the intrapersonal, interpersonal, institutional, community, and policy domains. I would encourage anyone who is familiar with or new to Thread or wants to develop those skills and build deep connections with others in our city to visit our website at thread.org. Few housekeeping notes before we begin. We are coming to you from Johns Hopkins University on the Homewood campus. The Thread Speaker Series is an extension of an undergraduate course here at Hopkins, so we do have some students in the room with us. We are glad to offer the series virtually via Zoom to our larger community. If you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function on the bottom of your Zoom window, and we will do our best to answer questions as time allows. We hope you would join us each week for additional discussions. You can view the upcoming speakers and register for additional discussions at thread.events/speakers. Today, I already feel all the good energy coming here. I am really grateful for so many reasons to be joined by an exceptional business, civic leader, and friend, Erricka Bridgeford. You have many formal titles as the co-founder of Baltimore Ceasefire,
right?
As the executive director of the Baltimore Community Mediation Center.
Yeah.
But you are also someone who has accomplished like what some would have maybe thought at different points in times to be unthinkable, like repealing the death penalty.
Yes.
Almost now a decade ago. And you've been recognized for all of that.
That's amazing.
I know it happens to us, right? You're Marylander of the Year.
That year, I Marylanded better than everybody and Baltimore better than everybody because I was also Baltimorean of the Year.
Goals.
My kids say people are really got that one wrong, but they don't get a vote. So that's the.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yes.
But I mean, the impact that you've had, and we've been talking about different forms of capital, human capital, financial capital, social capital, the immense amount of social capital that you have in the Baltimore community and the trust that people put in you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anyone who has that level of credibility. And from my experience, knowing you, my favorite story, my favorite biblical story, at least, is the story of King Solomon, where the two women claim that the baby is theirs, and he threatens then to cut the baby in half.
Right.
And the one whose child it actually was, of course, said, no, give the baby to her. Because the most important thing was the life of her child, not what she needed. And I've watched you time and time and time again put Baltimore and the people living here in Baltimore at the front of your priorities, and oftentimes at a personal cost, physical, mental, emotional. So anyway, I'm just grateful to get to spend more time with you.
Thank you.
And for more people to learn about the incredible work you're doing. If I could wave a magic wand and make anything happen in Baltimore City right now, I would want to see the work of the Baltimore Community Mediation Center in every high school, very selfishly, because of the young people that are part of our Thread community. And so for those who may not be familiar with the center, could you just share a little bit about basics? What is mediation? What does the center do? And what is your role in those efforts?
So mediation in the community mediation framework, it is, it brings people together who are either in conflict or need to have a hard conversation. You can use mediation if you're planning something together and you want to avoid future conflict so that we're really on the same page. We have detailed agreements before we even go into this next thing.
Right.
And so it is, it's a 2-hour session that is in the community mediation model in Baltimore. It's a free service. You can have as many 2-hour mediation sessions as you need. It is confidential by law because we fought really hard to pass that law to protect what happens at the mediation table, because we know that a lot of conflicts that people have are things that if they went and talked about it to other service, everybody pretend you see fingers over here or not, just watch the nub do quotes. Because either I lost my train of thought with the nub joke. What was I saying?
You were talking about why it's important that confidentiality is
Oh,
maintained.
because we know that a lot of situations that people are in, they went and talked to service providers. Somebody might call the police. Right. About the thing that they're having a conflict in, or they're just ashamed or embarrassed about whatever the thing is. And so they don't feel safe just talking to anybody about whatever is going on in the conflict, whatever the misunderstandings are about. And so when people don't have a safe space to actually talk to one another, then what happens is instead of talking to the person I'm having a conflict with, I'm telling you and you and you, and they're throwing their opinions, right? So things often end violently when people haven't had that opportunity. So it's not that conflicts about like illegal or embarrassing things don't get resolved. They do get resolved, generally just in more violent ways. And so we make sure that it's confidential so that people know whatever it is I talk about, the mediators cannot take it outside of this room. And the participants by law can't go into a court proceeding or administrative hearing and say, oh, you know what Sarah said in mediation though? Like, so it's really a safe space. So it makes people really say all the things they want to say. It's also a non-judgmental process. So we take mediators through starting at a 50-hour training, which they get for free. So normally you would pay about $2,500 if you wanted to be trained to be a mediator. So we give that training for free, and not from a braggadocious, but a factual place. Right. Our training is like kind of the best in the country. And so you get that training for free, but the way you pay for it is by volunteering your time as a mediator in Baltimore, so that we're not passing costs along to people who are in conflict. So it's important for it to be free, because no matter how much people make conflict, just being in conflict with people in your life costs you a lot already. So we don't want people to have to, on top of that, pay money to have to pay for mediation. And so the mediators listen to the entire, whatever the story is. They don't give advice, they don't make suggestions, but they provide a process where each person feels heard and understood by the mediators. Mm-hmm. And if they want to, through a really intense brainstorm process where the participants come up with all the ideas about what would actually work to resolve this between us. And outside of pandemic times, we intentionally partner with places all over Baltimore who say, oh, I have a room in my building that you can use for free in case people who live anywhere near here need to have a mediation here. So the mediation center is all the way over on Greenmount Avenue, right? And so we believe that we want people to understand, if you're having conflict in your community, you can resolve that conflict right in your community. You shouldn't have to go outside of where you live to resolve your conflict if it's happening right here where you live. And so we operate off of this 10-point community mediation model that's all about it's honoring diversity across all kinds of differences. And so, for example, we are intentionally training and recruiting mediators who represent Baltimore's diversity, because no matter who you are, when you show up at the mediation table for a hard conversation, you should look up and see that one of the mediators, we use a co-mediation model, so there's always two mediators. So one of the mediators, when you look up, should match some of your major identifiers, right? And so for most humans, whatever your gender identity, your racial ethnic identity, age, if age is playing into the conflict,
I
right?
see.
And so, for example, if there's a husband and wife who have a conflict and both of the mediators are women, as soon as that man walks in the room, he's like, all right, I'm surrounded, you know, like that. Or if it's a parent and teen having a conflict, if both of the mediators are adults, that young person is going, who's ahead gonna be listening to me, right? And so we're training youth to be mediators, and they go through the exact same 50-hour mediation training with the adults. And young people often do better at learning the mediation skills than adults do, because the model we use is called the inclusive model. It is based in mediators really being present and never saying what they think or feel or believe. And that is hard. For 2 hours, y'all met me for 2 hours. For me not to say what I think or feel, my face can't show what I think, my tone can't change when somebody says something misogynistic, you know what I mean? And I'm working on having to understand that person who's saying whatever it is they're saying. I'm working on understanding their emotions they're expressing, the values they're expressing, the things they're saying they have conflict about. And so it is internal work that you're doing as a mediator, right? I'm as close to unconditional love as I ever am when I'm operating as a mediator. And so my role in the work, I started as a mediator because one of my brothers got shot by a friend in broad daylight in the neighborhood that we grew up in. And he was dead on arrival, but he survived. But while he was going through everything in his healing process, we didn't know if he was going to make it. And the job I had at the time, I was using, you know, all of my vacation time and personal time, because, you know, I don't usually take those things. So I had a lot of it piled up. And so I was using that time to work half a day and be at the hospital half a day with my brother. And maybe the 4th or 5th day I was leaving work to go to the hospital, my supervisor made some snide remark on my way out of the door. And, you know, this was before I was the peace lady. So, and, you know, I was in a space of trauma. And it just wasn't the time to play in my face with some passive aggressive thing you're doing on my way out the door, you know? So I turned and said, you have something you need to say to me? And she said, well, you're about to be written up for being insubordinate because I don't like your tone, because I'm talking to her in front of the other 4 coworkers. She supervised all 5 of us. And I said, that's nice. My question still stands. Do you have something you need to say? So she decided to call the Community Mediation Center to come give our team some conflict management training, because people were choosing sides and everybody was on my side because I was right. And so the mediation center came and gave us conflict management training. And in that training, the trainer came to me and said, this was 2001, in the like spring of 2001, she came to me and said, you should be a mediator. And I said, that's nice. How much does it pay? At the time, I was making $18,000 a year and I had 3 small children and a high school diploma, because I hate school and you got to pay me to go to college. So I was, you know, how much does it pay? And she explained the volunteer nature of it that I just explained to you. And she was like, but I mean, you can get it, you know, like once you become a mediator, it could become a career path. And I feel like I should have paid attention to that, because I did not ever want to be an executive director of anything. And, you know, this many years later, they got me. So, but I started as a mediator. I went through training in 2001. Of September of 2001. So when planes were hitting buildings, I was learning how to help create peace in Baltimore. So it felt meaningful to me that I was going through mediation training at that time of what was happening in the world. And so by November, I was working at the mediation center doing intake as the person who listens to people calling in, saying the other person is a lunatic, and setting up mediations for people. By the spring of 2002, I was the director of training. So I was training all of the mediators in Baltimore. And by 2005, I started working at Community Mediation Maryland. So I'm training all of the mediators in the state and, you know, some around the country as well. And then in 2001, I became the executive director back in Baltimore. So Yeah. So right now, I'm the person, if you call the mediation center to get conflict management training, which is one of the things we do as a grassroots nonprofit, that's a funding stream. And so, and we want everybody in the city to have conflict management training, because nobody taught y'all how to deal with conflict in a healthy way. And nobody nurtures that anywhere, really. We live in the cancel people and keep their same energy culture. Like that's not oh, let's resolve things and move together peacefully. And so I'm the person that will show up to do that training when you call us for conflict management training. That's the part I love. I love training.
So many places we can go from what you've
I
just
know,
shared.
I know.
So one thing I don't want to lose is, I think what I really appreciate about the model is that, like, underneath it, I think is this belief that we're all interconnected and we all
Yes.
have value and we all have something to give and we all have things that we need help with as well.
Yes.
And I feel like the way that Baltimore Community Mediation Center plays that out institutionally is, okay, the resource that you have as an organization is to teach and train around these mediation skills, but then, you know, having volunteers then go out and give. So it's just a continual, like,
yeah.
You know.
And our belief really is you can be, as a Baltimorean, you can be on either side of that table, right? So participants can become mediators. That's one of my favorite things, when I mediated something and then I do a training next year and one of the participants is in the mediation training to become a mediator.
Yeah.
And so conflict of interest wise, I had to act like I never saw this person before, right? And so, but inside I'm like, you know, and so with the first time that happened, it was a parenting plan that I had done, which is when co-parents who aren't married anymore, right, or together anymore, are having conflicts around raising kids. And those can go long. This one was 16 2-hour sessions. And I had been looking at the evaluation forms after every single, you know, session to see how they felt like things were going. So mediation is over. Maybe 5 months later, I'm leading a mediation training, and the woman in that situation is in the training, and I'm acting like I don't know her. And so which confused her. So by the lunch break, she was worried about me, right? She's like, you do remember me, right? Like, you know who I am? And I said, she said, you can't talk to She said,
does it ever go the other way though, where one of the mediators ends up in mediation?
So we as mediators use mediation for our own conflicts. So right now I am scheduled for 2 separate mediations because of conflicts that I'm having with other mediation center directors around the state of Maryland. So yes, we walk our talk. It's not just like, oh, all of y'all need mediation, but I'm fine. When I'm realized like I'm livid to a place that no, I need a space to get this and really say the things outside of my professional role. I need to be a full participant. I go, yep, let's try mediation. Like or if it's just the nuances of it are kind of challenging or awkward or like whatever, we absolutely use it ourselves. Yeah. And so this woman explained to me, she said, well, I know you can't talk about it, but I can, right? I said, you can say whatever you want. So she said, the reason I wanted to become a mediator is although we didn't get the agreements that I wanted and I was disappointed in how the process ended, in those sessions was the most that we ever talked to each other. Even during that time, outside of mediation, we really didn't communicate about our kids or anything else. So all of the talking only happened while we were at the mediation table. And I kept trying to figure out, what is she doing to us that's making us able to actually talk to each other? She said, so whatever that was you were doing, I needed to learn how to do that to people. And that's why she came through the training.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I think the consistency and continuity in how in what you say you believe and what you actually do is like really impressive.
Thank you.
I want to go back to something you were talking about and try to better understand. So if you have 2 people that are functioning as the mediators in a conflict, and it's important to mirror, I know you shared with me a ton of data around how critical it is to have those mirrors. Could you help me understand how you train a mediator who is the mirror, how they're showing up differently than the person who may not be the mirror in that situation? Or is there a difference?
They're not showing up differently. And that's
Okay.
the beauty of it, because we're training, every mediator goes through the exact same training, right? And so we don't train like, oh, so if they're Black people, you mediate them this way. And if it's a Black person and a white person, then you got to do this. Okay, if it's an Indigenous person and a Latino, then we're not doing that, because and a lot of times diversity trainings reinforce stereotypes. Right. And so we're not doing any of the, if they're a particular something, here's how you listen. We're going, as human beings, people need to feel heard and understood. When people feel judged, the brain says to the body, your sense of well-being is threatened right now. So you either need to escalate or run or just freeze and hope it all goes away. And so giving that humans, like being understood, is a biological necessity for people. And so if you provide a space where people can show up authentically and say what they really want to say to each other, and you don't put colonized guidelines, you have to speak one at a time, you can't, because that's what it is. Those are called colonizer reindeer games. This, we have to speak one at a time or else it's not a productive conversation. If I gotta speak one at a time, this probably is not gonna work, because when you start lying, I'm going to interrupt. You know what I'm saying? No disrespectful language. What do you mean disrespectful? Profanity is my love language. What are we saying? If I can't cuss while I'm really talking and expressing myself, especially if I'm hurt or angry or confused, like the things we go through in conflict, I feel shut down. Like I can't find all of the words. If you are limiting what my language is supposed to sound like, so that you as the mediator feel more comfortable when it's not your situation, it's mine. And from a quality perspective, if resolution, right, is built in a fake box where we all had to play nice with one another and we couldn't really say the things, whatever agreements we come up with are not going to hold up when we go back to real life and go back to acting the way we really act. So we have to come in and be who we really are. And the mediators have to be present with that. The mediators learn how to not judge. Notice, where are my judgments? Let me move them out of the way, right? And so this is one reason I love being a trainer, is because a huge part of the training is the trainer's job is to make the trainees very uncomfortable, to say politically incorrect things, to say racist things, to say, I think like anything that pops up is the greatest place on earth for me is mediation training, because my job is to make you notice those places where you would have stopped listening.
I see.
Where you would have judged, oh, you're not supposed to talk like that in mixed company, or children shouldn't talk like that to adults. Like wherever all of your judgments rise up while people are having their conflict, in the moment that you're deciding that they're behaving wrong, they're still talking. So you missed 2 sentences that happened. You know what I mean? Like you're not. So we teach mediators to be present. So while we know that we live in a society where participants need to see their major identifiers and mediators in order for them to feel heard and understood at the beginning of mediation, we know that in that 2 hours, they're going to feel heard and understood regardless. It just is harder for them to lean into that this is a safe space. But all of the mediators are going to show up and do exactly the same thing, which is practice non-judgmental listening and running a quality process where people can get the details of what resolution or justice or whatever it is looks like for them.
I mean, I love how you're both acknowledging the bias of the participants and saying, like, this is the society we live in. Our lived experience shapes our mental model, and that's what you're bringing into the room. And teaching the mediators to put that to also be aware. You have to be aware of it and putting it aside. And the truth of the matter is, when you are a mediator, whatever other kinds of things that trigger you or get on your nerves, you better believe that participant is going to show up at the table to test you. You know what I mean? If you're having a conflict with your aunt, trust and believe that conflict with a different name is going to show up at the table, just because you aren't doing the work in your real life. And now you got to sit here and work on understanding the person who has the same position that your aunt has, and you can't debate it. You have to make sure
they feel heard by you, actively heard by you, And so it is like doing this work makes me the person I say I want to be, because it gives me tangible skills about how. So we say, oh, meet people where they are, but nobody really teaches you, how do I do that? How do I meet somebody where they are when I think they ratchet though? You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you mean? This person's condescending. I'm not meeting them over there, right? And so we teach mediators, you never have to agree with what somebody is saying in order to understand where they're coming from, and let them know that you're working on understanding. They never have to know whether you agree with them or not.
I think it's an incredible thing. If everyone had that skill, we would have so much richer and more authentic and honest conversations.
That's right.
And also be able to simultaneously hold like our point of view and personality and drives.
Yes.
And allow other people to kind of be
and
themselves.
Even in our social justice work, we wouldn't be so adversarial. One of my biggest problems with the way that activism looks a lot of times is activists show up and dehumanize the other side, right? So, I'm saying this, and I'm literally named after the revolution, right? My name is Erricka, after Erricka Huggins, who was a Black Panther. My middle name is Angela, after Angela Davis. My parents intentionally got pregnant with me because we're going to have a boy who's going to change the world. So I would have been named Malcolm after Malcolm X, and my middle name would have been Patrice after Patrice Lumumba, who led a revolution in the Congo. So I'm saying that everything I'm about to say from a gangster perspective, right? When you show up and you call police pigs, for example, right? What you're doing is functioning in the exact same vibration that causes police to be violent toward community members, because it's a dehumanization, right? It's treating people as if they're animals. And so if your belief is, well, if they treat people like animals, then we need to treat them like animals too, then don't be surprised when all you keep experiencing in our society is people treating each other like animals, because you're participating in it and nurturing it and raising that vibration, making that vibration bigger, instead of removing your focus from those kind of strategies. Because I can stand up and say what is painful and hurtful and problematic about police strategies, for example, right? In a way with emotional intelligence, right? Because if I'm yelling and screaming at them, they're humans that I'm yelling and screaming at. And so their brain says to them, I'm not safe right now. So they escalate or shut down, which means they're not hearing very valid points you're making, because you yelled up, you showed up and yelled and called them a bunch of names. And so if we really want healing, there needs to be spaces where people who vehemently disagree with each other, somebody in the room has to be a bridge. Somebody in the room has to be, I'm not participating in any of the energies that are about arguing or the only thing I'm inserting is an energy of understanding. Because as I do that work, then the people on the opposite sides of the bridge, they de-escalate, they see each other's humanity more and more. They can come across the bridge and decide together. So given everything, what would justice look like? What would more humane strategies look like? What would, right? But if as an activist, I start at a space of using the same kinds of tactics that I say shouldn't be used toward me, right? So I want everybody to have these skills so that they can stand. And this is the reason. So when you say like the kind of, I'm not aware of my social capital, really. I mean, you're helping me understand that in our friendship. And so I trust you. I'm like, sir, I said I'm worth the dough, so y'all need to give it to me. But, but trust, I'm very aware that I'm trusted, right? I'm very aware that my integrity is never in question. People are going to say a lot of things about me. She is too loud. She cusses too much. I don't know why I saw her butt cheeks all summer and whatever she was dressed in. I don't think leaders are supposed to dress like that. Like, people will put all of their respectability politics on me as a woman from West Baltimore. But what they will never say is she's a liar. What they're never going to say is she doesn't walk the talk that she's asking from everybody. She's doing that work within herself. And that's what matters to me the most, because especially being more and more in the public eye, people do dehumanize you. Like I heard, you all were talking about earlier that like people that reach a certain level in other people's minds, you become more of a concept to people than a human being. And so I lead with my humanity because I understand the importance of people knowing that give their own permission to lead with their humanity.
And what I mean by social capital is just you have an entire city who trusts you.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean is
Ooh,
if you
that's
call
a
me
big
and you
deal.
say to
Think
me,
about it. Oh
I
my
need
God.
you to go do X, I'm going to be like, okay,
Okay,
like you don't
right,
need to
right.
explain it to me.
Right.
You don't need to ask
Yeah.
twice.
Yeah.
I'll just figure
Right.
out
If she
because
says it, I probably can trust it.
because I
Yeah,
trust that
yeah,
it's whatever you tell me, I'm going to trust that needs to happen.
yeah.
I'm really like, I would love if you could, and I know how reflective you are just as a human.
Mhm.
Like, how did you do you feel like it's nature, nurture, both? How did you get to a place of like as I'm listening to you, what I hear is someone who is so grounded and clear on who they are.
Oh yeah.
And it's that grounding that creates space for other people
Yeah.
because you just are secure in you. And
Yeah.
how did you I think that's
Nurture,
something people
nature, and
struggle with.
trauma.
Okay.
It's all three that created who I show up as in the world: nurture, nature, and trauma. So from an, vibration perspective, my parents called me forth, right? We want this kind of person to come through us.
Mhm.
So they had an intention, and wherever I was, in the ether, I was like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be everything I can possibly be. And I know that, yes, I'm aware that I am here to just whatever I think of my greatest, highest, next vision of myself, I'm trying to figure out how to be that.
And
I'm aware of
they
that.
would voice this to you. Was it something your parents would
From the
say?
time I was little, so I started talking at 5 months old, which is spooky, but it happened. And so from the time they knew that I understood what they were saying, they talked to me about who they saw me as and what they wanted. And so we had family dinners every Sunday growing up in the projects in West Baltimore. And my parents talked to us. I heard my dad was a Black Panther when he was younger. So we were raised with the idea that if you believe something is unjust, if you're complaining about it, that means there's something you can do about it. If you're not going to do anything about it, you probably should just shut up, because you're just adding to this negative feeling of we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. Oh my God, we can't make it. Shut up. Think of what you can offer for it. And I was raised that way. And so they told me about, and they wanted to humanize themselves to me as my parents. So they told me about, and they were teenage parents. I left that part out. So my mom was 16 when she had me and my dad was 18. And so it was a struggle for them in 1972, right, as Black teenagers to be birthing a baby when there were people going, don't have that baby, get an abortion. What if something turned out to be wrong with it? And then I come like this. And the whole time my mother was like, well, if there's something wrong with the baby, I'm just going to love the baby because it'll be my baby. And whatever is wrong, and that's how, so when I came out like this, my parents were like, I don't see what the big deal is. Why is everybody, freaking out? And so they nurtured me, right? And talked to me about, as a Black person in this society, a responsibility that I had to my people, to my community, because it's a responsibility to myself. So that I am, because we are, like, I got raised in that mentality. But then also, so I was naturally that way. I got nurtured that way. But then I lived in a world that my mom said when I was in the stroller and couldn't understand, she experienced first the kind of discrimination that I was going to experience the rest of my life, because people would look at her and say, what did you do while you were pregnant that made her have one hand, right? So she got blamed. But then also she said people would look at my baby and start sentences with, she can't, and then fill in the rest, you know? And so that made my parents be like, oh, she can't? Okay. And so my dad taught me how to tie my shoes when I was 3. And you know what I mean? I knew how to read before I went to school, which was problematic because then I told everybody that parents were lying about Santa Claus. And so we kept, I didn't understand how come you can't tell the truth. Like I got my parents got all kind of phone calls because I told the truth too much. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, y'all parents lying. I don't know. And when have you ever seen white people walk through our neighborhood? We don't even have chimneys. I don't understand. Like, it was.
Our mothers have to meet at some point, like because
Yeah.
I'm telling you, so like when I came out like this, my parents had kind of, it was, they didn't know what to do or what it would mean.
Yeah.
And how it would impact like my ability to move through life and how it would impact my feelings about myself. It was so traumatic for them that my dad delivered both of my younger siblings in my parents' bedroom, even though my dad's a plumber.
Just to make,
he's like,
just, you know what, I can do this.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not letting anyone else.
Yeah,
and if he were here right now, he'd say it's just plumbing. Like all that stuff is just plumbing. It's just like swimming around.
You got a point a little bit.
It's an accurate point, but it's, I do think like, when it creates that when you have something happen at birth or in a family, it creates a dynamic, at least it has in my experience, where that relationship, in terms of like focus of the parents on ensuring there's that deep sense of self, because you can't, it can only be internal because the external is just going to make things harder.
My parents were horrified as a little girl. So the way that trauma of rejection by society impacted me when I was in the house before I started school, I'm like, oh, having one hand is great. Like I didn't understand why the rest of y'all got so many fingers. Y'all don't even use all of them, but that's a different workshop. And so, but I felt loved and regular. And, so my parents did this balance of like teaching me that you are like everybody else and you're not at the same, but you can do anything you want to do, but be clear, you are like everybody else and you're not at the same time. And so that felt good to me. And then I go out into the world that's looking at me and pitying me and like I'm broken and all of this stuff. And so I did a lot. I just wanted to be liked. And it drove my parents crazy because they would watch kids treat me mean. And I would still just be my friend. I'll bring my Barbies outside and he has some of my chips. And, my parents gave me so many speeches about what a real friend is. Cause I just wanted to just be my friend, just like me. And they realized we got to let her learn on her own. Right. And so I know that it is I spent a lot of my life just wanting to be liked and accepted and internalizing, because people didn't like me having one hand or pitied it or whatever. I thought I didn't like it. I was in my 30s when I remembered I actually loved having one hand. In my 30s, I would give myself like one day a year. Up until my 30s, I gave myself one day a year to just cry all day about everything I went through about having one hand. And then I realized it wasn't that I didn't like having one hand. I didn't like how people treated me for having one hand. And then I realized I'm never going to be people's perceptions of me. I'm not, whatever it is they think they're looking at, I'm never going to be exactly that. I'm always only going to be me. So that's the thing I need to focus on. I can't keep focusing on how people look at me, how people talk to me, except for to learn better how to stand up for myself. And so the trauma of all of that, it like boomeranged me back and forth in my life, from really low self-esteem, suicide attempt in 2004, to being what you people can't imagine that I was like that. But it really is about remembering that I'm me and I actually love me and I love my purpose and I know what my purpose is and I'm clear about it. And it doesn't matter if it looks crazy or horrifying or whatever to people, because they don't have to walk it.
I think it's probably those moments that no one besides you will ever fully understand that got you from
That's
here
exactly
to
right.
here.
That's
It's
exactly
just
right.
something like so deep that there's probably not
Yeah,
enough words for, but we can
Yeah.
all feel it.
right.
Like that's the thing. It's hard to like
That's right.
explain what
Because
that
it's a
looked like.
vibration.
Yeah.
It's a vibration. It doesn't require words. It
Words.
really, right.
You just feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so I'm curious. One of the things I've experienced when I loved that you add trauma onto nature nurture with you.
Yes.
I'm fully with you.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is interesting or a little bit complicated is we've all had varying degrees of trauma.
Yes.
Right? And layered on top of whatever our own individual lived experience is structural racism
Yeah.
and trauma that has been layered on by policies, by communities, by
Yeah.
institutions, right? So
Yeah.
even if we're at perfection at the intrapersonal, right? We've done our journey, we've had our
Right.
crying, like we've done the work,
Mhm.
and then we've built strong relationships. Like there's still layers that
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah.
What, like when you're thinking about training mediators,
Mhm.
where does trauma in their own life play a role in what skills they need to build, and what patterns do you see in, and maybe it's none, but do you see patterns in folks
Mhm.
who've had more trauma in how they show up in mediation
That's a really good
than people who have
As
not?
mediators or as participants? As mediators. Okay. So the place that it plays out for mediators is, so trauma and then the way that we get socialized in general. We really believe that what helping other people looks like is controlling them. It's telling them what to do and what we believe is right or wrong. And trauma puts you in this space of fear that when you see somebody doing something that is outside of your value system or the way you think they should act, you're trying to jump in immediately to help, right? And so helping people, getting people in the training to really understand that because that self-determination is a huge value in our work. And so people get to determine for themselves how to move through the mediation process and resolve their conflict. And if they need to yell and scream and cuss and call each other names and say horrible stuff to each other, as long as nobody's in physical danger, we're going to train you to handle all of that and to help de-escalate it. And before people know it, they're going to move past it and be building agreements together. We can train you how to do that, but you have to be willing to be honest with yourself about when those judgments arise inside of you. You got to be willing to notice them and not try to weaponize the mediation process against people to really give your agendas that are based in things you've gone through and hand those agendas to other people. Because even if they take all of your wonderful advice that you think you're giving, if they use your advice to build their agreement, guess what? It's not going to work. It's not going to be sustainable in their actual life. This is why when your homegirl calls and she keeps messing with that guy that keeps cheating on her, and you're like, girl, leave him. And she be like, I know, girl, you're right. And then she sneak and be with him again. And you know who she doesn't tell? You. Right? Until something bad happens again. You be like, I thought she broke up with him, because she doesn't feel like, she knows you're going to judge that she's with them again. But if people are not able to be where they authentically are in their journey, they can't heal past that part. They can't go through that part to the other side if they're busy doing what you told them to do. Because now you're holding them in a holding pattern. They're going to do your advice, realize the places where it doesn't really work for them, slip back into what does feel comfortable and familiar, which is the thing you think they shouldn't be doing. But they are, in that meantime, they aren't learning for themselves how to actually work through it, And so that's a big piece. And so people's own biases and how their worldviews and all of that, that's the hardest thing for mediators to get through, like to get to a place of, so we don't teach people how to be non-judgmental. We teach people how to do non-judgmental. Because I don't know if you'll ever really in your internal workings be free of all the judgments that you have. Because a lot of our judgments serve us very well in living our lives every day, right? What you decide is good or bad, that serves you. It doesn't serve other people in their conflicts. Yeah.
question, can you walk me through just like on the ground, you're in a mediation and you've got someone who is an interrupter and someone whose trauma is wrapped up in being interrupted. How do you simultaneously deal with the person I'm a huge interrupter.
Me too.
Right. And it drives my husband crazy because he does not enjoy being interrupted.
Yeah.
What do you do in mediation when you've got that dynamic?
So the first thing a mediator has to do is resist the urge to analyze why this is happening. Right. So even the way that you ask the question, there's an analysis in there that it's the trauma that's causing the person to be triggered by the interrupt. So I don't know what people are. I don't know why you're interrupting or why you don't like being interrupted, because that's not why you're here. Right. So I'm not going to try to analyze, oh, this person got daddy issues. Oh, that's passive aggressive. Oh, she must be a little manic right now. I can tell bipolar myself. Oh, you know what I mean? So that's the first thing, is when you see behaviors at the mediation table, all of the assessments and analysis that come up in your head about why they're behaving this way, you got to put aside. Because again, you're missing what they're expressing. So you're missing an opportunity to make them feel heard and understood right now. So I'm just going, oh, all I know is this person is interrupting. So that must mean there's something that they're saying that is really important to them. Let me make sure I'm hearing that. Right. This person keeps saying, I'm not going to stay in here if you just keep interrupting me. So I need to work on. So I think I'm hearing you say you feel disrespected and shut down in the way communication is happening right now. What things would you need not to feel shut down? And this person's going, I can say whatever I want. It is a free country. And you know what? F you, by the way. Okay. So I think I'm hearing you say authenticity and the freedom to express yourself is important to you. I'm hearing you say you're feeling shut down. You're looking for uninterrupted time to speak. So what would you all need to happen so that you have the freedom to say what you need to say and you have uninterrupted time to say what you need to say? What would that look like? You know what happens? Because we don't start our mediation sessions setting those ground rules of talking one at a time and don't cuss and don't yell. We don't set those ground rules because they're based in Eurocentric ideals about what. So it's nice and tight and condescending, but nothing is resolved. You know what I mean? And so we just meet whatever, however you show up with it. So most of the time, when I do that kind of listening and making people feel heard, what they don't do is go, okay, so a rule is no more cussing and you don't interrupt me until. They don't do that. When I'm asking, what would you need so that you get they just go back into whatever the argument is. And so I keep working on understanding so the biggest part is to not be in the way of people's process, but be present with what you actually see them expressing and make sure they feel heard around it, and then hand back to them what decisions they want to make about what to do about it, which they're in a better space to do because they feel heard.
Right. They're not in fight or flight.
They're not in fight or flight mode. They're in thinking of all the possibilities mode. They're in, oh, is that what you've been saying all this time? Mode.
Yeah. I don't want to run out of time before, because I could go down this for all night long. But I would love for you to share about peace warriors.
Okay.
Because it's, I think, one of the most important things happening in our city. And I think everyone should know about it and find ways to be a part of it. So could you just share, like, what is that initiative?
Yes. Okay.
Why?
Yes.
And why now?
I'll start with the why. So the why is so it's a Black men and boys initiative with the working title of Peace Warriors, because we believe that society has failed and continues failing Black men and boys specifically. So we all operate wrong around violence, right? Clearly, because we live in a violent country. And Black men and boys experience violence at exponential rates in comparison to all other demographics, right? And so that means something has gone wrong intentionally, right, with Black men and boys. And so for us, we're going, okay, what can we do that builds people's confidence when they're in a conflict, that I know how to handle this. I don't have to resort to, because I feel out of control, I'm gonna just pop off on you. But if I'm confident that I know how to listen, I know how to express myself, I know how to, even if we disagree, I know how to navigate that. they're more likely to get to resolutions in their life and build relationships instead of having relationships destroyed because nobody in the conversation knew how to deal with things. So the goal is for us to engage Black men and boys in Baltimore around peace work in general. So to give at least 2,000 Black men and boys conflict management skills training in the next 2 years. Which would then mean that some of them are going to be like, I want to learn more of this, and they'll become mediators. And so when Black men and boys in Baltimore are in conflict and come to mediation, there will be Black men and boy mediators across the table mediating, right? To advocate for the use of mediation among themselves. So we want to be on everybody's list of who you call when you're in conflict. People are like, I'm calling the police, I'm calling my lawyer, I'm calling my cousins and them. That's me, I call my cousins and them, right? We want you to go, wait, I can also call the mediation center. So Black men and boys all over the city are aware that there is a safe, confidential place that you can go and talk about whatever it is. And nobody's going to end up in jail, losing their job, dead, right? None of that is going to happen. You're going to get the healing and understanding you need. We need Black men and boys to be saying that out loud to each other all the time. As soon as you hear about somebody having a problem with somebody, you know to say, man, you know, you can call to me. You know, the people over on Greenmount, they can get you right, right? That's what we need. And so we want them, because we believe in the power of Black men and boys in Baltimore, you know, and if Black men and boys vibration as a demographic is we start at how peaceful can we be first, how, you know, how much we can express ourselves without others feeling attacked, but still hear our truth. Right. This whole city will look different.
Agreed. What's your biggest barrier to that actually happening?
Funding. So let's say there's a group. So for example, Let's Thrive Baltimore is a wonderful organization. Lisa helps youth. She does all kind of work with youth, right? And so she wants a conflict management training through the Black Men and Boys Initiative, right? So if I wanted to even give her 8 hours of conflict management training, it's $250 an hour, which is really a very competitive, affordable rate for the level of professional skills training that you're going to get from us. It's a really good price. And her organization, as a small grassroots nonprofit, can't afford to pay $250 an hour to train all of the youth that she works with. So, but if we had funding, we could give her the training for free because we had donations coming in to help pay for it toward it, right? So that's what we really want. So a big part, we do want to be able to hire a Black man to lead the initiative. And we want to be able to provide stipends and transportation if we like the training, wherever the training is, so that people can get to it. Or if stipends would help them be interested in coming to the training, you know, like, because once we got you there, that's it. You drinking the Kool-Aid, whether you like it or not. Or if they want to do projects together about why peace is important to them and learning how to deal with your own self is important to them and the way you navigate conflict. Like they want to do projects spreading that message. We want to be able to pay them stipends for doing that work, right? So that's the kind of thing that we need. So we need funding for the initiative.
Okay. I'm gonna ask one last question before we bye.
No.
I'm being instructed.
No more questions.
It's the hidden power in the room. All right. I am going to ask you one last question.
Okay, I'm going to try to make the answer quick, I promise.
We've talked a lot about mediation, a lot about relationships, a lot about your family. Can you just share one example for folks who want to have relationships across lines of difference, but like, you know, that takes skill and intentionality. Like, what is a relationship you've had across a line of difference or multiple lines of difference, and how did it shape you?
Okay, so my relationship with you is just freaking amazing because you're like my white soulmate and we both know it. So there's that.
Thank you.
And so Lori Charkoudian, who is the person who was that lady who said, you should be a mediator. That was Lori. She was she started the Community Mediation Center in Baltimore. And at the time, she was the executive director. So she's the person who showed up to give us that 1 hour training that we had at first. And so, and she's from Boston, Armenian, you know, like there was nothing about our worlds that would have been the same, except that she was very heavily, she'd been doing social justice work since her teens, right? And so that meant that she started at a place of working, recognizing her own privilege in this world, in this country at least. Because, you know, Armenians are like the Black people of white people, you know, so her people have experienced a lot of horror in history. So she had that as well. But also she understood people don't see that when they look at me. They see a white woman, and that comes with a lot of stuff. And so, you know, when I became the training director, as my supervisor, when people in the across Maryland are going, well, yes, we want our mediators trained, but can we have, they would name somebody who's a white person, right? Can we have that person come be our trainer? Because Erricka's more urban than I think our mediators would, you know, relate to, because we're more in a rural area. And so Lord would say, well, Erricka's the director of training. And so if you want a different trainer, she's the person you have to talk to. And this thing about urban and rural sounds racist to me. So we're not going to feed into that, but I am willing to be in the meeting, in the conversation you want to have with Erricka about which trainers you want and why. That kind of humanity in your supervisor, right? She was my friend straight off the break. Like as soon as I went through mediation training with her, you know, as the trainer, and then she was my supervisor when I started working there. She's been one of my closest, most trusted friends. When I had my suicide attempt, I was trying to be more vegetarian at the time. She came onto the psych ward with food packed in containers, advocating, because she knew whatever food I was getting on the psych ward wasn't meeting my nutritional needs. And so she brought food and advocated for them to, I don't know how to this day, how she got them to give me that food, but she did.
Wow. She probably went Armenian on them.
I think she did. I think so. Yeah. So it has impacted and shaped me tremendously. When my brother was killed, I definitely would have been fired had I worked somewhere else. But she sat me down because for like 3 months, I was just late for everything and not showing up at places and everything. And she sat me down and said, okay, so you are dealing with something unimaginable. What is it that you need to get through it, and we preserve the reputation of this organization? Because you're our director of training, you can't just be not showing up places, but clearly if you're not showing up, you need some help. So we had that conversation, you know what I mean? And it's just been, she's been that kind of human in my life. So the joke is nobody is really sure if Erricka and Lord are the same person, because a lot of times we're not in the same room at the same time, but we're that bonded in our heart space.
Thank you for sharing that. All right, I'm going to move to
okay.
So I don't get in. All right,
we're answering your questions now.
All right. So do you work with the Department of Justice and the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services? The mediation will be good to reconcile inmates on parole and those on probation with the people in the community they may have.
Reentry mediation is actually one of my favorite things on earth. Yes. So the answer is yes. Okay. In the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention's budget, reentry mediation is a line item. And so it is people before they are coming home, let us know who on the outside they want to resolve conflicts with or have hard conversations with before they come home. So we bring mediators into the prison, and it still has to be confidential. So there's a 2-hour conversation. No CO in the room can hear anything that's being said. And they can have as many of those sessions as they need. And so it reduces recidivism because people are able to build strong relationships before they come home. And so we know that when you come out of prison, what happens in the first 48 hours dictates where you're going to be 3 months and 6 months later. So the stronger those plans are before you come home, the more likely you are never to re-engage with the criminal and justice system again. And so We love that work. And actually we run out of the money that is provided by GOCCP. Did I say that right? But at some point in the year. And so Laura does a 70-mile run from the Hagerstown prison complex to the mediation center in Baltimore every year to raise money, because that's because if I'm in Baltimore, but my loved one is incarcerated in Hagerstown, I have to get transportation to get there to have the mediation with them, right? And so she runs that distance as symbolic of what it takes for people to go and have that hard conversation. But we do that to raise money for transportation for people to get to prisons to mediate with their loved ones or whoever they need to have a conversation with. And this year, the Run for Reentry is happening on the 29th and 30th. And so we'll be talking all about, on the 30th, she'll arrive. So this year, Darrell, this guy named Darrell, who was formerly incarcerated, he's running the 70 miles this year. And so him and Laura are going to run it together. And so when they arrive at the mediation center, it'll be around 1:30 in the afternoon on the 30th of October. So we're going to have a big celebration and, speeches, and media can ask questions and all of that kind of stuff. So reentry mediation is one of my favorite kinds for the very reason that this person said. Yeah.
All right. Our last question.
Okay.
How do you keep your process community centered and equitable, even when you are delivering mediation training in corporate or non-community spaces?
Well, because we don't change what we do. So I don't show up in a corporate space and be different than what you see me being kind of right now. So
I don't think I've ever seen you be different than who you are. You're just who you are.
Because that's what caused my suicide attempt. Trying to be what made society more comfortable with me. And so because I'm very aware that I'm choosing to stay here, I got to do it my way, and I got to be free. But the point of the question, we do the exact same training no matter where we go. So I'll meet with the organization to find out specifically if there are certain kinds of examples or, conflicts that you see happening more often, so that when it's time to practice the skills, I'm using scenarios that are relevant to you. But we're doing the same training no matter where we go, because we're teaching honoring people's humanity skills is what we're teaching. And so I don't have to do anything different. And corporate people live in a community. That's the thing, right? When we say corporate and community, is you other everybody, and even thinking about it that way. And I can't think about it that way. I think about it like I understand that we are all one and have chosen to separate ourselves around different things. But if you get me in the room, I'm treating you the same way I treat everybody everywhere I go, because I honor everybody's humanity, because I want y'all to do that to me.
One last thing, will you share your website and
yes,
and how people can get involved and help, both financially, but also potentially joining as mediators and clients and all the things that
so communitymediation.org is the website. So you can go there to donate, you can go there to ask for mediation, you can go there to become a mediator, become a volunteer. Even if you don't want to be a mediator, how to just volunteer and get involved in the work, you can go there and get that, email and find out about that. Quick, easy ways to donate. We have started, you can text peace to 707070 and send whatever donation you want that way. My birthday is coming up on the 9th of October and I'm turning 50. And this is when y'all say, oh my gosh, she looks so good. I know. And so you can text in my when I was on the radio and stuff, my name is E Wonder, and my inspirational speaking name is E Wonder. So you can text E Wonder, all one word, to 707070 to donate to the Mediation Center in honor of my work and my birthday, and that you want me to be here for another 50 years. And so we're asking people, and those donate, make it fun, donate something with a 5, either multiples of 5 or, donation that got a 5 in it. So it could be $5.50, $500, right? And so, so go to the website, get involved in the work. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, pay attention to posts, share things, get involved whatever way makes the most sense.
I so appreciate always getting to spend time with you, but especially in
Thank
this
you.
context where others get to like learn about just like the abundance that is you as a human. So it's very much appreciated.
Thank you
just-
for having me. This has been great.
Yeah, and just
Yeah.
thank you to everyone who's joined also virtually.
Thank
We
you.
encourage you to continue to join us on Wednesdays at 5:30. We will be observing Yom Kippur next week, but then the week after on October 12th, we'll be joined by Marjorie Rogers. So we hope you will join us again, and appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to learn more about how you can really intentionally build relationships with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, and do it across lines of difference in a way that can get to more just outcomes for everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.